Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tech Talk in our Business Process Excellence series. Today's session is a deep dive into using the deliverables hierarchy and the delivery plan in the Microsoft Business Process Catalog. My name is Mandy Tovez, and I will be your moderator today. I will also be doing some presenting. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. If you do not consent to be a part of a recorded session, please disconnect your line. We encourage you to use the Q&A panel at any time to ask questions regarding content or request support. We'll be answering questions throughout and at the end of the presentation. At the end of the session, don't forget to respond to our survey. We appreciate your feedback as we use this to improve future events. As I mentioned, my name is Mandy Tovez. I'm Senior Program Manager at Microsoft. We also have with us today Rachel Profit, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft. You can see her information there on the screen. And we also have Leo Solomons, Value Engineer from Mavam, who will be doing some demos for you today. Here's our agenda for today. We're covering two main topics, as I said in the intro, both pillars of the business process catalog that deal with execution. Part one is the deliverables tree. This is where we define what needs to be configured and built. We'll talk through an overview, some work item types and categorizations, best practices, and also real-world applications and examples, followed by a demo. We'll then move over and talk about the delivery plan. This is about when and in what sequence that work happens. We'll cover how it's structured around success by design phases, how workshops drive the plan, and again, practical do's and don'ts. Both of these pillars build on what we covered in previous sessions about the business process hierarchy and the objectives pillar. If you attended those, you'll see the same pattern. Today's session will be a high-level review of each tree. In future Tech Talks, we will be diving even deeper into each work item type under the deliverables tree with even more specific guidance. All right, let's jump into the deliverables tree. The deliverables tree transforms what would otherwise be a flat task list into a structured, navigable hierarchy with over 7,000 predefined deliverables. The structure is straightforward. At the top level, you have the deliverables tree folder. Then we move down to the next level, which has your functional areas. You can see some examples there on the screen. Level 3 goes even deeper into sub-areas or domain-specific groupings. So under finance, you'd see accounting, tax and compliance, treasury. At level 4, you get the work item type folders, configuration, workflow, report, integration, enhancement, documentation, and many more. These are just a few examples. These are the categories for every deliverable your team will work on. And then at level 5, and this is important, the level 5 entries are the actual deliverables themselves. So under a functional area like customer experience, you'd see sub-areas at level 3, and then level 4, you'd see your folder for configurations, and at level 5, you'd find those actual individual configurations, like configure case routing rules and set up SLA definitions. These 7,000 deliverables aren't just a reference list. They're designed to filter by your business process scope. They can become custom work items, they map to area paths in Azure DevOps, and they support scaled agile planning. One thing I want to stress, don't change the area paths. If you rename finance to accounting, that's fine. Renaming is easy. But if you actually restructure the area paths, adding new ones, removing existing ones, you have to go manually remap every business process at levels 4, 5, and 6. That's a significant effort. So if you're going to do it, have a very strategic reason and budget the time to remap everything. What you should customize is the naming. We actually renamed sales to customer experience in the March release of the Business Process Catalog because that better reflects how organizations think about it today. Again, I'll reiterate, rename as needed, just don't restructure. Okay, there's a lot on this slide, and as I mentioned earlier, we'll deep dive in future tech talks into each of these work item types. But for now, here are the 14 distinct work item types we've got available. Each one ensures your deliverables are properly categorized with the right fields, governance, and reporting. I'll just walk through a few examples and what they mean in practice. Configuration, this is any standard system setup. The number of sequences, parameters, any screen that's available out of the box. If you can configure it without writing code, it's a configuration. Workflow, this covers approval chains and automated routing. These could be traditional F&O workflows, business process flows and customer engagement, or Power Automate flows. We'll jump down to requirement. This is a business definition of what the system must do. Requirements get triaged and turned into one or more other deliverable types. Think of them as inputs that eventually close once the actual configurations, enhancements, or integrations that address them are in place. Okay, so I gave you some examples here. Again, we'll go into a lot of detail in later tech talks and really get in and explain each individual one. Okay, now we'll get into area path relationships. Let's see how these work item types connect together in practice. Take a single level 3 business process, like process vendor invoices. From that one process, you generate multiple deliverable types. You need a configuration to set up invoice matching policies, a workflow to configure the invoice approval chain, an integration to import invoices from a legacy system, a report for AP aging, a migration for open vendor invoices. I think you're starting to get the point. Each of these becomes a work item on your team's board in Azure DevOps. And that's the power of this model. One business process unpacks into concrete, trackable, assignable work. The deliverables tree gives you this mapping out of the box for over 7,000 deliverables, as I mentioned. You don't have to build this from scratch. This brings us to the do's and don'ts for work item types. The principle is simple. Each work item should represent one distinct deliverable. Be specific, not vague or overly broad. On the do side, invoice approval workflow is a great workflow item. AP aging summary, as we just talked about, is a clear report. Migrate open vendor balances is a specific migration, and configure PO tolerances is a focus configuration. Now, what not to do? Setting up everything for AP is way too broad and won't get you specific enough work item type. Build vendor stuff is not specific enough. It's really vague. Test the system, again, is combining multiple test scenarios into one item and is way too broad. Write all the docs, again, bundles multiple documentation artifacts together. Reiterating here, each work item should be something one person or one team can own, complete, and verify. If you find yourself writing a work item that covers too many things, think about breaking that apart. That's what you need to do with work item types. Okay, choosing the right type. As we looked at on the previous screen, the previous two screens ago, there's a lot of work item types. but choosing the right type ensures the right fields, governance, and reporting. Again, we'll go into this in a lot more detail, but use configuration for standard setup and out-of-the-box screens. We've already mentioned that. We've talked about approvals or workflows being for approval chains. And when an enhancement includes a new setup screen, you're going to need both an enhancement and a configuration work item. What not to do here is don't misuse configurations. Custom code belongs in enhancement, not configuration. But keep in mind that if your custom code adds a new configuration, you should actually create both, as we just talked about. Documentation misuse is putting the documentation directly on the documentation work item. This task is intended to be the task that you need to create the documentation, but typically you are documenting the actual business process, scenario, or system process, and the documentation should go directly on the topic or work item type you are documenting. Combining types, migration, and integration have different life cycles, so don't merge them. Catch-all is misuse. The deliverable type should not be used as a catch-all. And testing versus test cases. Testing is about strategy and planning. Test cases are the actual tests. So make sure you're knowing what the difference is when you're going forward with this. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to walk you through deliverables in action. Rachel, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mandy. We're going to go ahead and take a quick look at a few of these work item types inside of Azure DevOps. On the left-hand side, you can actually see in this screenshot the requirements inside of Azure DevOps. So in this case, I've created a new requirement, and currently we provide no requirements out of the box. We are evaluating and considering including a large number of predefined requirements in future releases as a starting point. The requirement is very simple and it doesn't have a lot of fields. You'll basically define a description, some acceptance criteria, and you can do some requirement mapping. There's also a priority field, and you can disposition that requirement to indicate if it's a fit or a gap. And then if it is a gap, you can disposition like your gap solution approach. Typically, requirements should all be dispositioned and closed out and converted into actual test cases or new security elements or enhancements at the end of a particular phase or a sprint. In some industries, requirements are required. So keep that in mind in terms of like the way that you document. If you do have specific industry requirements, like in the pharma industry, about how you need to track and document requirements, then you may need to add a couple additional fields into your requirements. Next, I have an example here of integrations. So integrations, there are some integrations that are provided out of the box. For example, all of the dual write maps that are available out of the box between CE and F&O applications are included. And they have the source and target systems, and they indicate that it is a dual write type integration and so on. Most integrations, though, are going to be custom for every implementation. And so you're typically going to be creating these manually. You'll notice on the right-hand side that there is a tab called Information. The Information tab is available on many different work item types in Azure DevOps. And that Information tab is where all of those details will go. In this case, the fields that you see here are the fields that further define an integration. And they actually map exactly to the fields that we require in our solution blueprint review with the FastTrack team. So making sure that you're filling out all of those fields and capturing all of that information is critical. The last example that I wanted to quickly walk through is the data migrations. So data migrations are another example of work items. We do include some data migration work items in our template. On the left-hand side, you can see that basic information. Again, you have description and acceptance criteria, along with responsibility roles, scoping, and planning detail fields. But that information tab is where you're going to really put all of the details about your data migration. One key tip with data migrations is that we recommend each source system that you're migrating from should have its own work item type. So for example, if you're migrating from 2 different legacy systems, your customers, we would recommend that you create 2 data migration work items. We have created many of the typical data migrations that are required for business processes and map them. For example, like migrating customers and open balances for customers are already pre-created, but you'll need to refine the existing ones. And you may need to duplicate that work item if you have more than one source item. So with that, I'm now going to hand it over to Leo, who is going to do a demo of working with these deliverables inside of Maven. Leo, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. So now we're going to have a look at these concepts, but then from the Maven perspective. Just as a quick recap, Maven is the business process management tool that serves as the front end and is connected to ADO, where in a visual fashion, you can not only represent all of the level 1s through level 3s processes from the business process catalog in a visual fashion to allow you to interact with them and input things like some of the metadata that we just saw, but also the mapping happens to the L4 scenarios, L5 system processes, all the way down to the L6, which are the test cases that then subsequently is synchronized in between Maven and ADO so that we can maintain full alignment in between the business view of the implementation and the actual project execution and project management. So for that, we're going to have a look specifically today at one of the modules of the Maven platform, which is Improve, and is what you're seeing on your screen. And what we're going to do is focus specifically on the deliverables. So we go ahead and click on this part, and we will focus around the service delivery configurations. And once we click that, we can go in, and under the subtopics, we see all the distinct configuration deliverables, and we're going to select the incident types. And once we do that, we see here the list of metadata functions. And so clicking on the pencil as I did allows us now to go in and start adapting the metadata that you're seeing here and are the ones that are synchronized and that we just saw over on the ADO side in Rachel's demo. So let's go ahead and do some of that. We can scroll through and we can start setting some of these items. For instance, let's select the scoping. We can set it to in scope. We can look at the manual configuration as an item, and then we can continue and select, for instance, that this is for the partner. And we can continue in selecting. Let's grab another example here of some of the toggles, including the multiples here. And for instance, as the outcome of a functional design session, we can go in and include, as you're seeing here, all of the outcomes of the functional design that are then accompanied as well under the description. After that, we can continue filling in some more example fields. Let's look at the actual scoping and sizing. We put in medium here, as well as the estimated project scope and impact. And we can also define, as we're seeing here, some of the acceptance criteria. As we spoke earlier, the catalog itself contains some of the actual test cases. Those obviously are also present and synced on the ADO side. And with these acceptance criteria, we can then fully complete the testing and the toll gating that happens for the acceptance of that particular configuration. Once that is done, we can go in, and again, hitting on the pencil will allow us to save all of these changes that we've done to the metadata. And once that is fully processed, we should see, here we go, the success. Now, one thing I do want to highlight here is that within Mavim, and we saw that on a previous slide as well, we can showcase the link in between these configuration deliverables and the corresponding L3 processes and L4 specific scenarios to which they correspond. And so for this one, we can go in and look for this particular incident type. We go to the chart and we can see visualized here the actual L3 business process, which is receive service request, and how that one relates to the particular deliverable. So let's continue now, and we're going to make this a little bigger so that we can see it. And we're going to grab as a second example the integrations. So we go ahead and click on this one. And with that, we're going to see that, as was mentioned, there aren't any predefined integrations. And so we're going to add one as a topic here. We go in, and this one is going to be an IoT integration that we've selected. Once we hit the OK button and go back to refresh, we'll see it reflected here. And now we have all of those same metadata field sets available that we can now go in and start populating as well. So by clicking on the pencil again, we see here we can start editing some of these fields like I did before. We're going to set this to custom. We are going to make this a project-specific integration. We're going to set the particular application to Azure in this case, as it's an Azure IoT integration. And we can fill in some additional other fields like the area path. And as we mentioned, this one is important because remember, it is the area path that forms the connection from level 3 business process and level 4 scenario to the actual deliverables. In this case, our integration deliverables. So we do want to go in and select, as we were doing under the service options here, the service delivery, and set that particular area path for the connectivity. And then we can continue with some additional descriptions. In this case, we are going to bring in the results of an architectural design. And in addition, we can also set the scope as in scope, of course, as we've introduced this integration and the third party. And with that as well, the particular event-driven method for this one. And we can go ahead and click on the submit. And as we saw in the prior example, it's going to get committed to the database for exchange with ADO, and we should receive, there we go, the successful integration or inclusion of the metadata. And so with that, we conclude this first demo of the Mavim side. I'll hand it back over to you, Rachel, to continue with our presentation today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leo. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the delivery plan. So now that we've covered the deliverables tree, which is what needs to be configured and built, I want to bridge that to part 2 of our session, which is that delivery plan. Deliverables and the delivery plan are designed to work together. The deliverables tell you what And the delivery plan tells you when and in what sequence and who needs to do the particular work. And together, they connect that business process definition into your actual project execution. Before we go deeper into the delivery plan, I want to set a few expectations. The delivery plan is a framework. It is not a methodology. And I want to be very crisp and clear on this point. If you have no methodology and you're a brand new partner looking for a good starting point, this is a good starting point. The phases we've defined in our delivery plan align with the success by design phases. The functional areas match what you've already seen in the deliverable tree. And then we've converted every checklist from the Success by Design implementation guide into actionable tasks, documents, and workshops. But here's the thing. This is your bread and butter as a partner. This is how you differentiate yourself. We're not telling you that this tree is mandatory. What I am saying is that if you make your own delivery plan, yours should include all of the things that ours includes. Our 13 Success by Design required activities, our validation points, our execution checklists. Make sure that all of those things that are included are accounted for in your own delivery plan and your own methodology. What you add is your own execution approach. It's very common that you might define different phases and get more granular in how you deliver, the way you plan your sprints, your delivery cadence, your team organization, your exact change management process, your industry-specific accelerators. The delivery plan gives you a skeleton, and you're going to bring that to life with your own methodology. I'm also saying that our delivery plan is not complete. We don't expect it to be complete. It will never be complete. It is meant to be a starting point, a template, right? You may need more phases. You may need to rename some of those functional areas. And we call them functional areas, but you might call them work streams, and that's totally fine. If you do at least everything that we've included, all of those tasks, workshops, and so on, then you'll be in great shape. The rest is up to you. So I want to walk through this structure in a little bit more detail. The delivery plan has 4 levels. At level 1 are the phases. This is aligned to Success by Design. The strategize, initiate, implement, prepare, and operate. Level 2 are those same functional areas that you saw in the deliverables tree. So finance, HR, operations, supply chain, and customer experience. This is another customization opportunity. You can structure these to match how your customer organizes their own organization and your project team. Level 3 is where you'll find workshops, and this is collaborative sessions that are aligned to functional areas. And we'll talk a little bit more about these in our next slide. And level 4 is where you'll find tasks and documentation. These are the actionable items and deliverables for each of those workshops. You will actually find some tasks and documentation at level 3 as well. But there are over 800 predefined topics that are all outcome oriented and all anchored to deliverables and processes in the catalog. Remember, this is not a detailed project plan. It's a structured framework that you can map to your methodology and create a detailed project plan from. So, the workshops, I think, are where the delivery plan starts to get a little more practical, and I think brings the delivery plan to life a little bit. Our delivery plan and execution of Success by Design is driven by workshops. And there are 3 main types of workshops that are included that form a natural progression. first are those scenario board discovery workshops. These happen early in the project and relate to the entire end-to-end process. The example that you see here on the slide is the case to resolution scenario board. The outcome is primarily that you are capturing requirements, which is like what the business needs. You might also capture testing requirements and security considerations that come out of those initial workshops. These are the high-level strategic conversations. Then you execute on what we refer to as a storyline design review workshop. These are still pretty high level, but they're more focused. The basic idea is that after your scenario board, you go prepare and execute a demo of how the system works out of the box, so that you can do a fit to standard kind of demo and show it to the customer pretty quickly and have a discussion about why this doesn't work for you. And when you're done with that storyline, you should be able to get further down in that scoping and your fit gap analysis. Requirements will continue flowing out of these sessions. So you might create more requirements. And this is also where you're going to define where you need to dive deeper. Which deep dive workshops do we need to execute? And then these detailed process workshops are the third type of workshop that we've included. And these relate to specific process areas like accounts payable. In our standard catalog, every L2 business process area has at least one workshop, but in some cases, there might be 3 or 4. Taking the acquire assets underneath acquire to dispose as an example, we've split the workshops into fixed assets, asset leases, and capitalized assets with project management. So depending on the scope and the direction, you might need to deliver multiple workshops, or if the scope of your project doesn't include asset leases, you could entirely skip that workshop, for example. The pattern here is that the first 2 workshop types relate to end-to-end process, and the third relates to the process areas. And as you move from discovery to design to detailed workshop, that output starts to shift from requirements and scoping to the actual concrete deliverables. And the delivery plan includes all of these workshops, and they connect back to the deliverables tree and the business processes that we just discussed. So here are the do's and don'ts for the delivery plan. We do ask that you align your teams on sequencing and map your methodology to the success by design phases. We've actually included a column in our template for the partner phases and a separate column for you to do this. So we're not saying that you should rename or overwrite the existing phases from success by design. Rather, use your own column to do that mapping for you and map your phases to the success by design phases. We do ask that you also include all of the success by design required activities, and those come from the implementation guide, and we've converted them into actionable tasks for you and organized them into folders and phases. We also recommend that you use the Azure DevOps timeline view to help you visualize those dependencies and treat it as a living plan that evolves throughout your project. Now, on the right-hand side, some of the things that we don't recommend you do. And first is don't treat it as a complete project plan. Now, we do recommend that you create a project plan and get to that point, but the thing that I am providing is not a detailed project plan. It's a framework. We also don't recommend that you build everything from scratch. Leverage what's already here and don't create a disconnected plan that ignores the deliverables and processes. We also don't recommend that you make it too granular at the outset of your project, and start with what we've given you and break down further as needed. And lastly, don't treat this plan as static. The plan should evolve as your project progresses. the biggest mistake I see partners ignoring the delivery plan entirely and building their own from scratch. You can absolutely customize it, but validate that all of our tasks and workshops are accounted for. If you skip that step, you'll likely miss something that Success by Design expects, and we would be asking for in any FastTrack engagement. So now what I'm going to do is a short demonstration for you of the delivery plan in Azure DevOps. So I'm here in Azure DevOps and I'm going to expand. You'll notice that we've got folders for each of the phases. I'm going to back up just a hair here. Each of the phases in the Success by Design strategy. You'll also notice that we've broken down implement a little bit further. So underneath implement, we have design, develop, and test subfolders. When you break down further, most of these folders have a process-focused solution folder, which is what I drill into here next. And this is where you can see those workshops. When you drill down underneath the workshops, that's where you'll see the tasks and documentation. So every single workshop of this storyboards and storylines have tasks underneath them, and they're the same task, but it's specific to that particular workshop. So in this case, like I've got acquire to dispose. And so after you've done that storyline design review workshop, you would need to document your gaps and your RAID log. So any risks, actions, issues, and decisions. We also, at that point, you're ready to refine your acquire to dispose user stories, plan those detailed design workshops, and you can start and create your acquire to dispose design document. Now, if we drill down a little bit further, I'm going to collapse these down and look at some other folders. So we're going to go into implement, for example. And in this case, I'm going to drill into the integration strategy. As an example, in our integration strategy, we've created all of the tasks in here, which are the recommendations of the things that we recommend you create as a part of your integration strategy, creating architecture diagrams, data mapping, integration test data, so on and so forth. You'll also notice that there is a document deliverable included for documenting your integration goals. And as you scroll down, you'll find other work items in here as well, such as the integration design workshop. So this is one of the standard workshops that we execute as a part of the FastTrack program. And this workshop has the details for the workshops that we recommend as a part of a FastTrack engagement. Even if you aren't engaged with a FastTrack solution architect and you're delivering this on your own, these are still workshops that we recommend that you would run with your customers. Obviously, there are additional folders. I'm drilling into the test folder here as well. There are tasks related to change management, integration testing, performance testing, and so on. So there's a lot of tasks and folders in here, and obviously we haven't gone through every single one in great detail, but that hopefully gives you a high-level idea of how to navigate that folder structure inside of the Success by Design delivery plan. Key takeaway, if you want to find the workshops, they're underneath all of the process-focused solution folders underneath the various phases. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Leo, who is now going to do a demonstration of the delivery plan in Maven. Leo, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Yes, so let's now migrate over to Maven and have essentially a look at those same elements out of the Success by Design framework, but then from more of a business perspective. And we're going to do this in the same fashion as we did a moment ago by starting with the Success by design plan and focusing on the workshops. As you can see here, there are many different types of workshops in the success by design at different levels, following both the phases as well as the activities. And we are going to start by focusing on what we saw on the slide as well, which is, let me go ahead and select this one, the scenario board. If I increase the font on this one, we see that those activities have already started, highlighted in green. And now if I go into the editing mode, we see here how we can select additional areas and set, for instance, through color coding, which one of those end-to-ends, the high-level ones, we want to make sure to include as the areas of special attention that we need to focus on and bring into scope. And you're seeing how we do that with the highlight here. And we can commit these as well and make sure that they're part of the outcome. With that, we not only have, as you can see here, let me select these items, but we have on the one hand, those specific areas of interest. But as you're seeing here where I'm highlighting in the tree itself, the actual tasks as well that correspond to those activities that need to be executed in this particular scenario board discovery workshop. So we can have a look at that. And as we then continue, we can go over and start looking now at some more specific and detailed workshops as well. So let's go in and look at the phases of success by design. We're seeing them here: strategize, initialize, and implement, prepare, and operate. And we're going to focus in implement and look specifically at two examples from within data management. So we're going ahead and select this part. And let me increase the font here. And we are going to focus on a task first. We're going to start with the creation of the data migration packet definition and sequence. And just like we saw in the example before, once we select this item, we can start work on populating those fields through this edit that we see here and start adding the metadata information that is pertinent, like the priority and some of the descriptions if we need to adapt that, for instance, setting things in and out of scope, which we done as well through the visual interface. And for instance, introduce some impediments as an example here. And so as we go and validate the last fields, we can go and, as we saw in the prior example, we save that and this gets committed to the database and this becomes part of the information that is synced with ADO. Now, I want to focus on the second piece here, which is the data migration plan. And this one speaks to one of those do's and don'ts that we saw on the slide as well, where we just focused on the creation of a data migration package definition as an activity. This part here concerns the actual document. And this is one of an example of a document folder that contains an actual document, which we're going to look at. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And we'll see that that particular document, in this case, the data migration plan itself, has been created and included in the documents folder itself and is fully contained here as an example. Now, Mavim itself as a platform has the ability to house these documents that you're seeing here in the word editing interface. And so you can elect in the execution of your project to have the documents embedded in Mavim or simply connect to, let's say, a document management system or repository where all of the project documentation resides. We can connect to that as well. So, and we can see here, obviously, for the documents as well, we have the metadata and we can validate, again, all of those fields pertinent to the exchange of information with ADO. We're seeing the examples here. Or if there are cases where we need to go in and adapt, we can do those as well. You've seen the examples of that. And once that those adaptations and additions have been done, we again save, commit them to the database. And through the automated connection in between Mavim and ADO, again, we will ensure that all of these components driven from the workshop and the workshop outcomes, that in this case is a document example, gets synchronized over on the ADO side so that the implementation teams have access to it, and the mechanisms in ADO can ensure proper project management over it. And again, fully in sync with the front-end business visual view that Mavin provides. So with that, it concludes the brief overview that I wanted to give to you of success by design, and I want to hand it back over to Rachel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leo. So we're going to switch gears, and we've pulled together a number of resources and recommendations for you based off of the topics that we've discussed today. So these resources and next steps are some resources that you can use to help you get started on your journey or get more questions answered if you have more questions. We also have a slide here with your Microsoft and Mavin Business Process Excellence resources. So these links take you to resources that are more specific to the Mavin side of things. And you can start your free trial using the QR code that you see on the screen here. Our next Tech Talk in the series will actually be Thursday, May 14th. We will be taking next week off, taking a little break for a week. But the topic on the 14th is going to be transforming business processes with an agentic mindset for customer engagement apps. We hope you'll mark your calendars for that event. And with that, we want to remind everyone that your feedback is very important to us. So if you could take a few moments to fill out the survey about today's event, your feedback is always appreciated and welcome. And we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. We do have a couple questions in the chat. Some of them we've already answered, but I'll repeat them and answer them verbally for the video as well. So the first one that I want to do is about the Azure DevOps. So the question, I'm going to read it out loud. So in Azure DevOps, we're limited to importing around 1,000 lines per file. So we have to split large data sets. For example, BPC has 5,800 plus lines and deliverables around 7,000 lines, which makes the process quite time consuming. Even after running all the scripts, some fields like application family are not getting imported and require manual adjustments. Overall, a lot of tweaking is to complete the import. It would be really helpful if future releases provided a more streamlined way to handle bulk imports into Azure DevOps. So 2 comments on this. We are planning and working on a Python script to actually import the files. You can today already use Power Automate to import these files, which eliminates the need to split them. That limitation of 1,000 lines is an Azure DevOps limitation that we can't change. I'll also point out that if you are using Mavin, they have a native integration that uses those Power Automate APIs to automatically synchronize. I would also point out to you that we would recommend that you do some cleanup in those files prior to importing them. For example, if you're not implementing Business Central, we would recommend that you delete all of the lines related to Business Central. We have had a few bugs reported to us about the application family and a few other columns that are required but were not populated. So we're working to clean those bugs and issues up. As you find those issues, we ask that you please report them in our Azure or in our GitHub repo. I do believe we've got the link here. It's aka.ms/business process catalog feedback that takes you to our GitHub repository on the issues tab where you can report issues. So if you do have issues, feature requests, ideas, all of that, those can all be submitted through that catalog feedback. So we definitely encourage you to be using that. We definitely appreciate the feedback, and we feel your pain. And we're working towards trying to make that better and easier for you in the future. The next question is, somebody said, just wondering what is meant by user stories and where you are suggesting they're captured, since user story work items are to be disabled. And that's a great question. This question came in when I was talking about the delivery plan. And so the user stories is maybe not the right term that I should have used. User stories, and you are correct. We suggest that you disable. Now, in your project methodology, as a customer or a partner, if you want to capture user stories, you can absolutely do that. We're not telling you that you should not do that or you can't do that. User stories are documented in a very specific way. If you're not familiar with the concept of a user story is written in such a way that you say, as a user, as an accounts payable clerk, I need to process invoices so that I can pay vendors on time. And that's just an example of like how you would document a user story. They definitely can provide value. And if that's a technique that your team is familiar with and wants to use, absolutely go ahead and do it. A better term is maybe like the storyboard or the storyline. So when Leo actually did the demonstration of the storyboard and that big diagram in in Maven, like with the workshops and the graphic, and he was kind of highlighting the green path. Like what we're referring to is kind of that path, that storyline is maybe a better word. So like what we recommend is making these storylines. We're actually planning in a future release to add a new work item type into Maven, or a topic type into Maven, that is most likely going to be called a user journey. And that's what we're actually referring to. In Azure DevOps, user journeys are actually going to map to test suites and plans. And the basic idea is that a user journey is like the name of the story, or that storyline, which is like this like business scenario that you do from start to finish. And it's the compilation of all the individual little test cases and things that you need to do in your particular business. So that's the basic idea behind what I meant when I said user stories. And I should be more careful when I use that term user stories, because it is a term that has a very specific meaning. It's more that storyline or the storyboard. And we are planning to add this like new concept of a user journey. And that's more what I was referring to. So hopefully that helps and makes sense. If you've got more follow-up questions, feel free to type them in the chat. We keep getting lots of questions about the videos and the decks. Our team has a backlog right now of videos to go up onto our YouTube channel. So all of these videos will find their way into the Dynamics community page, but they're still working through a backlog of older videos that were created before our Tech Talks. We're trying to get them prioritized because we know that we're getting lots of questions and people are eager to get these along with those PowerPoints. So we're working closely with the team that does the video editing and posting to our YouTube channel, and we're hoping that we will be to the top of that list very soon. So keep an eye out. We'll definitely let you know when they do start showing up. And if you're not already in our LinkedIn group, we invite you to follow that LinkedIn group. We'll post about it there as well, to help bring awareness to it. I don't see any other questions, Mandy. Were there any other questions that I maybe missed in the chat that we need to address?
One other, can the document files folders be linked to SharePoint/Teams folder?
That's a great question. So in Azure DevOps, absolutely. So like Azure DevOps, like we don't generally recommend that you would write the documentation directly in Azure DevOps. So when you're creating that documentation, again, the advice is that it should be linked to the actual thing you're documenting. The task to do the documentation is just to drive the project management that the documentation needs to be written, but the documentation should relate back to a specific business process, scenario, system process, and so on. In Azure DevOps, if you want your documentation to be stored in SharePoint, there's a concept in Azure DevOps on the links tab where you can link to an external document, and then you would like get the URL to that. There's also, if you want a more simplistic way and you don't want to use the links tab because that can be a little bit more complicated, there's also a internal references field that you'll find on the references tab of every single work item in Azure DevOps and in Maven. That is just a long form text field that you can put a link to, and that can link to anything. And then if you're using Maven to document, we actually recommend that like key documentation of like a business process and like your policies and so on would actually go into the Word documentation portion of that particular topic. But you do also have the ability to link to other documents or artifacts. Maven does have a native SharePoint integration, and you can link to other external URLs as well. So if you're using something else for document management, you absolutely can post to a link to just about anything in either Azure DevOps or Maven. There's not really a right or wrong answer to where or how you store your documents. Just make sure you're thinking through a strategy in terms of how you're storing, how you're keeping your documentation fresh. If you're using Azure DevOps, right, to manage and store that, think about what that means for you post go live. Oftentimes Azure DevOps projects kind of dwindle off and air quote die after a project goes live, and people don't maintain their Azure DevOps because it's really meant for project management. So think about what you're doing from a documentation and a process management standpoint. SharePoint is absolutely a very good option for storing your documentation. All right. Do any other questions? I don't think we do.
Not in the chat. Nope, we don't.
Awesome. Well, we're right at the end of our time. We've got a few minutes left, but I want to thank everyone for joining us today. This concludes today's live event. This recording, like all the other Tech Talks, it's going to go in the backlog and will find its way to the Dynamics Tech Talk community site within the next couple of weeks. And we have posted that link in the chat. So thank you everyone for joining us.